We're back, baby. Horns up, talking Texas podcast. Fisher DeSabos, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Kreider. A lot of college football in general to discuss. Nothing with the Horns specifically. Obviously, we were on a bye, but we have to talk about the SEC picture.
Now we're five.
Now we're five. We have to talk about the SEC picture as a whole after Penn State, who we all know for years has been a joke and a sham and the most overrated college football program, even more so than Notre Dame. Blew it once again at home to Ohio State. Big game, James Franklin, not so much. But we have to talk about our hoops team first, which is not a great showing, of course, against Ohio State, who was unranked, but I believe that they will eventually become ranked. They have a lot of good players, a lot of veteran guys. They could stroke the three, a lot of guys they returned. It's a very peculiar situation, in my opinion, for the Horns. Obviously, we're missing Tremont Mark, who was a big transfer recruit from Arkansas that we got. He didn't play last night. One of our guards who is supposed to be our number 2 guy behind freshman phenom Tre Johnson, who was just absolutely unbelievably epic last night. But outside of him, the rest of our team looks like a complete and utter disaster. We go through this all the time when we cover March Madness, and there are so many things we say you need to win. If you want to forget about, obviously the whole thing, but if you want to win March Madness in general, right, you need bigs, you need playmakers, you need three-point shooting. We had absolutely none of that. Our bigs are weak and non-existent. We have no semblance of any kind of playmaker, someone to start the offense. Our defense was mid. Our three-point shooting, outside of if Johnson wasn't shooting the three, he went 5 of 10. We would have gone 2 of 18, which is just absolutely unacceptable from a team in college basketball.
Yeah, and meanwhile, they went 50%. They went 14 of 28.
Yeah, I mean, they had a bunch of guys. I mean, they had that guy Royal off the bench who hit 2 big threes. Thornton, 3 of 4. Parrish, 3 of 4. Michi Johnson had a really rough game, but which sucks because he's supposed to be one of their best players. He had a tough game last night against us, and imagine if he had a good game, right? So Kaluma, Nick, you texted in our group. You liked him. I like him as well. But Chedrick, more of the same, and it's just disheartening to see us have finally one of the top freshmen and one of the top freshmen that plays well, because we've had this before. We've had the Greg Browns of the world come in. Oh, he's a sick recruit. He's supposed to be fantastic, and he really didn't do much. But we had a really great team around him. Unfortunately, it looks like we have like a superstar potential player in college basketball, and it, to me, might be an Anthony Edwards at Georgia situation where he is just absolutely electric, must-watch TV, and the rest of our team just stinks.
Yeah.
It's game one. I feel like there's definitely a lot of growing and just identification that needs to happen. I think some of the glaring stuff that I was seeing is that Ohio State just looked deeper than we did in general. I mean, they had more players hit the court. Their rotation was pretty nice. I feel like we were playing really bad perimeter defense the entire game, letting up way too many easy threes. And early in the game, we were dominating them in the paint. And I just didn't understand why, we didn't bring it back to that game, and kind of D them up on the perimeter and force them to go in the paint a little bit more. But I think a lot of that has to do with what you were saying, is that our bigs are kind of weak. I think Kaluma has an opportunity to actually be a premier big. I mean, he played well at Kansas State in his career, and obviously that's a really great program that we're used to. But I think some of these guys just kind of need to figure out what their true identity is, and see who's going to be the one to kind of take the lead here. And obviously, they had such a loose leash for Tre Johnson early on. I mean, he was just firing away really early, and then he finally hit his groove, and then obviously was the leading scorer for the whole game. I think I saw someone at halftime tweet out that he's baby KD 2.0, which that'd be insane if that happened. But I think that team that KD was on was a little more talented than this one, the one that made the run. So I think we just need to look for more guys to figure out who can be the his Robin, because he's going to be Batman, and A lot of new faces. I think that's what happens when you have a lot of turnover. Like I think there's only two guys on at least the starting roster, or the guys who played today or yesterday, that were with the program last year. Actually, three guys, because
Mhm.
Onyema was also on the roster too. He didn't play much, but
Yeah.
Chendall Weaver and Shedrick and Onyema are the only three guys. The rest are transfers or freshmen. And like anytime that happens, like you just need a ton of time to mesh and mold, because like you can practice all you want, you can scrimmage all you want, but like there's no in-game experience together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Tre Johnson as a true freshman playing 39 minutes of the total 40 minutes in game one. The team you want to beat, Ohio State. Like you said, Josh, they're not ranked, but they will be eventually. New head coach for them. So this was an opportunity. RT's been here a minute now, right? An opportunity to kind of go out there and show them what you can do and what the Texas Longhorns basketball team is all about. And you fall short, but it's early, like you're saying, Nick. But anytime a team plays a true freshman 39 minutes, more than anyone else on the team, it means that you're scraping the bottom of the barrel already because you don't know where to go. And so you have to just, you say, okay, we'll ride talent. And that's what we have to do. We've been in a situation where we've had recruits of Tre Johnson's caliber, kind of, because this guy's a little different. I mean, he committed late to Texas. This is a guy that totally could have gone to the G League and then gone to the NBA. He's NBA ready right now, and a lot of people have already been saying that. Some people wanted him to take the year off and not even go play college basketball.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than Greg Brown,
Yeah.
but and he displayed that. I mean, his competency from a playmaking standpoint, passing guys open in the fast break. There was that one great pass that he had to Kaluma, who was running right up the middle of the paint, and he got him on an and one in the second half. That was really, really nice. We just don't have, and this has kind of been a problem with our teams for the past few years. Like Shedrick and Kaluma, despite their size, they're forwards, not centers.
Mm.
They're fours, not fives. And I think we're going to struggle to rebound this year because some of that is just effort, yes, but personnel dictates how you can rebound as well. And if your team doesn't have the size to rebound well, that can put you in trouble. Shooting can get fixed. Another thing that I feel like we need to tweak from a coaching perspective is starting engaged in the first half of a possession defensively and then kind of letting them get their bucket in the last 6 seconds. Breaking down when you think you've put in a good defensive effort and then all of a sudden like they were able to fire off an open three because we had a mental lapse at the very end that let one of their guys come up with a 3-point shot or break down a guy off the dribble and get to the paint. But all things we can try and fix. I think that this is going to be a rocky season, at least from a coverage standpoint, in regards to Rodney Terry and what people say about him. That's my projection of after watching one game.
I think your evaluation of like the bigs is correct. I mean, obviously we don't have a true five that played last night, but there's one on the roster for sure. He's a freshman, Jamie Vinson. And, looking him up, like just doing some research, like he's the number 36 ESPN center. He's the number 26 rival center. He was the number 11 overall player in the state of Texas. And he didn't hit the court at all. And I know he's a freshman, but like he's a 6'11 freshman, right? Who, has played, at top academies and played, of course, the summer leagues and like they go up against good talent. And
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like sometimes like size, plays such a big factor. And if you're 6'11, I don't care if you're, how old you are.
No,
like
we're gonna need him. We're gonna
exactly
Have to need him. He's like a massive body. I mean, Toss, you brought up like the, Tre Johnson moving the rock and the pass he had to Kaluma. We had like there were some good. We had, we had 10 points off fast breaks. We won the turnover battle and we had 18 points off turnovers. So like, even though defensively, like we had lapses like you're talking about, we still had moments where the defense was not only good, but productive offensively. And we played complementary basketball. But I agree, like that. Yes, he may need time to get his sea legs, but if we have a 6'11 freshman on the roster, he has to see the floor because you're 100% correct. Kaluma's a 4. Shedrick's a 4. These guys aren't 5s. We don't have like, and that's like the issue I was kind of talking about at the top. Like, we don't have a clear number 5, and we don't have a clear number 1. And like when you don't have either, your team's going to be in trouble. I think Weaver's a really gutsy guard. Rebounds well, tries to make plays. He just can't be a guy also that's shooting 10 shots a game. He's not a shooter.
He also can't be the guy leading our team in rebounds. He led our team in rebounds last night.
Yeah, as a
Yeah.
6'3" guard, you'd prefer it to be one of the big guys. I mean, I appreciate that skill set out of him. Like, you're never going to get mad at a guard for rebounding well, but you're more so scratching your head, being like, why wasn't that one of our 3 or our 4 or our 5? I like Weaver. I like him as a 2 guard. I mean, if Tre Johnson is going to be this type of player, like, he needs to play the point guard position. Like, he just has to do everything for this team, essentially. And Weaver can play off of that, but that means that he's got to be ready to shoot. And that's not necessarily like his bread and butter, although he did hit a nice deep 2 late in the game to cut it to like 6 at one point. I mean, he's a part of this team's success at whatever that means. He's instrumental, and he might be, he's clearly like one of the returning guys, like you mentioned, Nick, and he's going to start every game. He's probably going to take the defensive assignment of guarding their best player, at least their best guard. This is his team in a lot of ways. Like, he and Tre Johnson are going to have to be the driving engine behind this team.
Yeah.
And any that freshman, anyone that can help, like, you just can't stick. Shedrick's game is not rebounding, but when you don't have any support out there from a size standpoint, it makes it that much more challenging, right? Then he's fighting a losing battle.
For me, it kind of seemed like he was, handling the ball a little too much, in my opinion. Like, they weren't getting him open, down in the paint, and like he was having to take the ball up court a couple of times, and I don't want to see that out of him. I want him down low. I was a little underwhelmed with Jordan Pope. I thought he'd be a guy who would immediately come in and make a big impact. He played really well at Oregon State his past couple of years, averaged 17.5 points last year, as a sophomore. So, anytime that you get a guy like that coming over to a new conference, to a new team who's starting right away, like we kind of expected like what we had in years prior, right? Like with other guys that have transferred in, with what we had last year and the year before that. So it's like we said, it's game 1, overreactions central, but like this is an opponent that like you would see in maybe the second or third round of the tournament. So like
an opponent you want to. It's a good test. I think they were underranked maybe, but it's an opponent you still want to beat. You bring up Pope, which is fair. He was really good at Oregon State. Look, I think Pope, Larry from Indiana State, Mark from Arkansas, they're all decent to solid 3-point shooters. And if what you're saying is correct, Haas, and Tre Johnson has to be the do-it-all guy handling the rock and not only a scorer and a playmaker, then it's up to Rodney Terry to position our players to get the best open looks. And you bring up the point of Shedrick handling the rock or feeling it sounds like out of position last night. And that also falls on RT. It just, once again, I don't know what it is. I don't know what, I mean, other than like the few games we had with Beard, like it feels like for the past 6 years, our offense is either stagnant, clueless, no identity, and no real intention behind it. Like there's no real positionality with these guys. It's just kind of running around chaos and chucking up whatever best looking 3 we got.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, just for me, that it kind of feels like every year we have, like, let's just say like every year is a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
It's like a box of puzzles. And like every year we just have the wrong puzzle pieces and they're all jumbled up. Like you had mentioned, like we finally have a freshman who is like not completely raw, who is like can just go out there right away and make an immediate impact and go to the league. Will probably be like a top 3 pick in the NBA draft next year. Like how it's
top
trending.
top 5 probably for sure.
In years prior, you mentioned Greg Brown, like even like Mo Bamba and like, like Miles Turner was kind of a ways back, but like guys like that, like they were still pretty raw, and like not completely polished, and like they couldn't like just overtake a game, you know what I mean?
No.
And those teams around him, like were all pretty talented. Like there was guys that like contributed well. And then last year, like we didn't have that. And the year before that, we didn't have that. And like, it just kind of feels like the pieces are always, jumbled. Like what I was hoping Jordan Pope would be like a version of Marcus Carr. And like, we need that, like we need the guy who can run the point and be kind of that dynamic guy who can like, shoot you back into a game and also, find open looks. You know, we need the big guy like Timmy Allen who can take down low. You know, like it's just like we've never had the consistency to put it all together at once. You know.
Yeah, been thinking about this a lot, in the thought last season and in the past 2 seasons as we discuss college basketball, in particular the Horns and teams that are kind of like at that same level of competition, not necessarily like top 3 picks to win the NCAA tournament and be the best team in college basketball. You know, they're not that category. It's interesting because the transfer portal is so different we're seeing in football than it is in basketball. And I think part of that has to do with the lack of positionality in basketball, especially in high school and in college, where you want versatility, right? Because you get to the NBA, you want guys that can do a little bit of everything. The Thunder are built on that. The Celtics are built on that. Derek White can run the point, but he can also guard the opposing 4 if he needs to, right? Like that is instrumental in being a successful NBA team. But in college basketball, it kind of makes you middle in a way. You look at, you look at UConn, right? Like they have a clear structure of what they want to do. Last year, they had Klingon, they had Cam Spencer, right? Who was their guard, who brought the ball up, who could also shoot the 3. They had Stephon Castle, who was their wing, who could defend, who could get after the opposing team's best offensive player. Like it's a clear structure. And obviously Dan Hurley is one of the best coaches and he's going to go down as one of the best coaches of all time. But part of that is he knows what it means to have an identity and he's firm with that. He's very firm. So I think it's really challenging to win in the portal in college basketball, not only because of that positionality that I'm talking about, but also because of the skill set. Like the best college football players are playing for the best college football programs. And that's it, period. And in basketball, I just think the levels and variation of like a 9 out of 10 player and an 8 out of 10 player, it's a lot closer. Like it just is. Like there's a lot of guys that play basketball at a high level in high school, and they go to a variety of different programs. So to me, when I see a guy that transfers in and he's scoring 13 points per game at X school, and then he's only scoring 3 points per game at Texas, it's because like you don't know what ingredients you're cooking that soup with, and how can it flourish if you
The puzzle piece, bro. Like it's like
we're our college football team. We go and get Isaiah Bond, we go and get Adonai Mitchell, and they are immediately impactful because we know that the level of talent fits our scheme and also is just better than what we could get elsewhere. I mean, we're talking about it with Trey Moore, who was a sack monster at UTSA, and he's struggling to get that same level of productivity, even though he's having a really good season and he's still being great at stopping the run, et cetera. But like just because you win in the portal doesn't mean that these players are ready to play in prime time. And it doesn't mean that they're going to get what you need out of them. Like Arkansas was fine last year. They weren't great. So I'm interested to see. I think he's going to help us a lot with Mark, and hopefully he's going to have to be one of our top 3 players. But the portal in basketball is completely different than the portal in college football. I mean, Arthur Kaluma's on his 3rd team right now, right?
Yeah. Some of the other guys are. So is Mark. Mark was at Houston, then Arkansas, and is now here.
Yeah, I mean, for college football, it's like you're not going to get like a guy from Oral Roberts to come into Texas and immediately be an impact player like we did with Max Absmith last year.
Right. Never going to happen.
That's just never going to happen.
But he even didn't he wasn't as good as we thought he was going to be, to be honest. Like that team last year, like also really underwhelmed.
I mean,
and I look at, they did, dude. They did. They underwhelmed
the game last year.
But he wasn't like what there were games where he was great, and there was games where he disappeared. And I think
he hit a lot of big shots for us. The difference between a college football player and a college basketball player is Jaden Daniels becomes Jaden Daniels on step 3 of the process, or step 2, really, going to LSU and having 2 seasons of LSU to season himself and to improve as a player. It just doesn't happen like that in basketball. There is a certain point, and it's an earlier point in the process of evaluation where you know who the guy really is. And that's what's different
too. Is just like there's nothing like it in all of sports. Like,
yeah,
like what you're. I mean, like we mentioned this, like what Brady said. I forgot on what show he was on, but he basically had said, like, I feel bad for kids these days who play quarterback who get their careers ruined, right? Like when I was coming into Michigan, I'm talking in Brady's perspective. when I was coming into Michigan, I had to start as the number 7 quarterback on the depth chart, and then I worked my way to the number 3 quarterback on the depth chart. Then I worked my way to a starter, and then I was a 5th round draft pick, and eventually gets drafted, and then I get to sit a year behind Bledsoe, and it's like now these guys are just okay. Shedeur Sanders or whoever, like Carson Beck, like these guys just basically play and then they go straight to the league and then they're going to be the starter day one. And like, you see how that's happening and working out for guys like Bryce Young, obviously. It's a completely different position, I feel like. And
Richardson probably
that's
even
why we
more
find
so.
so many, yeah, and that's why we find Richardson's a perfect example, and that's why we find so much success with guys like Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow, right? And even Michael Penix, who still hasn't played yet, but like was in the national championship last year.
Bo
And,
Nix.
and Baker Mayfield and Bo Nix, like all these guys were at different programs. They learned from different coaches. They've had time to season and grow. Like,
I almost forgot that Baker played at Tech. I totally forgot that for a
Yeah,
second.
it's
Like
just, I will say this though, like to
Jalen
that
Hurts,
point,
Kyler Murray,
yeah,
like all the literally all these guys.
Quinn, like it's to all the whole point though, like it's such a for success in college and for success at the pro level, it really is such a recipe of where you are in your life, what coaching staff and program or franchise you're under. It all really has to align perfectly because then you have a guy like Stroud who was at Ohio State, was there the whole time, came in, dominates. But he went
Sure.
to the right place, was the right program, was at the right place in his life
But
versus a guy like Anthony Richardson who maybe wasn't.
but we will say too, though, that like the track record of Ohio State quarterbacks was bad for a while until it got to
Yes.
Stroud. He's one of the first ones that have actually hit. And of course, you're always going to have that. Like, I'm not saying that it's impossible for a quarterback to be at a university and go straight to the league, and like it happens. Like that's just talented players. But like, it. I feel like you just need time to grow and learn from a bunch of different people. Like, I'm honestly
Yeah,
gonna look
I
right
mean-
now at all the different teams and see like what, like just gonna think about the quarterbacks and who were at multiple universities. I guarantee it's more
Well,
than half.
so the thing with Stroud also is that it's a little bit of an unfair comparison to bring up the history of quarterbacks from Ohio State because Ryan Day had just recently become the head coach. Like, how long is Ryan? It's post Urban Meyer era, and he's kind of the first or second quarterback that was being evaluated under the Ryan Day era at Ohio State. To quickly like parlay it back to basketball,
Yeah.
Dalton Knecht was picked with the 22nd overall pick by the Los Angeles Lakers. That was the first individual selected in the first round of the NBA draft that had been that had accessed the transfer portal. And I'm even going to push back on the fact that Dalton Knecht was a guy that grew up in a small town, in a small market, and wasn't properly evaluated. And so much of the fact that he ended up at Tennessee was plucking him as opposed to he played for another university, was good, needed an extra shot. It's a little different, right? I mean, that's the beauty of the portal is because you can discover guys like Dalton Knecht deserves to be in the NBA, and Tennessee gave him that platform, but he was really good at Northern Colorado, and that's why Tennessee went and got him. And now he's playing for the Los Angeles Lakers, and he had 5 points yesterday, and he scored 18 2 games ago. Like, but he's also 24 years old. So some of that, I mean, you look at a guy like Duncan Robinson too, right? Who transferred to Michigan and then he ends up getting to the league. Those two scenarios we hear about and people talk about, but they're very different transfer situations than when you're looking at the talent that's on the Texas
Exception,
basketball
not
team.
the rule.
Exactly.
Exception, not the rule. So I think from a basketball standpoint, just hearing y'all talk, like comparing it to football, and I think we've discussed this multiple occasions, the imprint an individual could have on a basketball game is just so much greater than the imprint a player could have in the football game. Like there's 5 guys out there, you're touching the ball almost every single possession, and certain guys don't always fit well together. And it's way more evident when a player doesn't fit well, and it's way harder to get these guys to fit better at one succinct moment. Realistically, if Bond or Golden or any of those guys weren't working out, we have such a bevy of wide receiver depth. We could just continue to float guys in and move guys around until they kind of get their sea legs. We don't have that luxury in basketball because the roster's not as deep. You need those guys to play right away, and they may not be acclimated to one another. And that's going to be very evident very quickly. Like, games are so like Jordan Pope's game at Oregon State is going to have to be a lot different than it was at Texas. And that's going to take time for him to get acclimated to that. Ditto with Tre Johnson from coming out of high school. Ditto with Mark coming from Arkansas. Like they're all going to have to change their games kind of drastically in order to make this puzzle piece work. And that's why basketball is just extremely different than football. Football, you could kind of play guys a little bit, not the quarterback position necessarily, but wide receivers, running backs. Like if you take ETN going from Florida to Georgia, how different is it really going to be for him to kind of just get in there and tote the rock? Not extremely. It's a pretty similar situation, but it could be a totally different situation for the guys.
It's like
Indiana State where they're getting
they
all
were-
this running. Larry
They were already recruiting Etienne. You know, Georgia was recruiting Etienne out of college or out of high school, right? Like a lot of these guys already know the talent of the player that they're dealing with, and it's a great point about why Sark has built something so incredible on the football side of things. Is we have a hard time keeping DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo off the field, and those are two guys that were recruited by him, that were brought in, not transfers. We literally have to put them on the field and play. They are two of our impact players. I know Bonds missed time, but DeAndre Moore has really come onto his own. And we said that was not even a guy that we were thinking about at the beginning of the season. I think it was because he was hurt, honestly. Because guess what? Like in the locker room and the coaching staff, they know exactly what they want to do with the offensive weapons that they have. And wasn't he the one that caught that touchdown pass that got called back in the Michigan game? And we were kind of like, whoa, DeAndre Moore, he's out there right now. They already knew that he was supposed to be out there. So it's just really interesting. It's like you have to build from it's much easier to say, okay, we have so many opportunities from a recruiting standpoint with football because there's way more players. So we can miss and we can hit. And that's just the fact of the matter. And in basketball, you just don't have that luxury. But the good thing about having Tre Johnson in comparison to guys like Jared Allen and Mo Bamba and Miles Turner is he can be the primary ball handler. So you can run the offense through a guy like this. We haven't had this, at least recently, with the level of prospects that we've brought in. Brown was a wing, right? Like he was just sitting in the corner a lot of the times. Dylan Mitchell, same thing. We were like, ooh, he's going to have a cool tip slam because he couldn't bring the ball up. He couldn't be our primary ball handler and creator. And so that's the cool thing about Tre Johnson. Yeah, and if he's scoring 23 plus points per game, then every team that's playing us is saying, okay, we have to stop this guy. And then it makes the job so much easier for the rest of the guys. I mean, like it could make life really easy for RT for the rest of the season if he handles this the right way. Because this guy's he's really darn talented.
Yeah, he's insane. But the thing is like you said Toss about winning the transfer portal, and then you bring up Dylan Mitchell. There's also losing the transfer portal, which quite frankly, we did. We lost Tyrese Hunter, who was one of the leading scorers for Memphis last night. We lost Dylan Mitchell, who had 10 and 8 for Cincinnati. He's on Cincinnati, bro. Like, why? He's on fucking Cincinnati. Why is he on fucking Cincinnati? Like, that's crazy. Like, we could have used that last night. We had to have been able to use that last night. We lost Chris Johnson, who was a top 60 recruit. He's at Stephen F. Austin. He dropped 17. Like, we lost guys, man. We didn't develop and we lost guys. And it's just frustrating. Like, we could have had Dylan Mitchell. And Dylan Mitchell, 2-man game with Tre Johnson. You like that?
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, to me, it's like, why? It's a great question. Why did he go? Because if Texas is at their best version from a basketball standpoint, and so is Cincinnati, a very solid basketball school, the profile that our school has, and if they make a deep run in the tournament, the talent he's playing against in the SEC, that should give him the most leverage entering the NBA draft, hypothetically.
I think you want to stay in the Big 12.
So clearly he doesn't think that that's what our team offers.
You also have to like consider the human element of it too, like needing a hard reset, change of scenery. Like he was a kid coming out of high school where everyone was like, this guy is going to be so sick and he's going to be a lottery pick right after freshman year. Like he was a top 10 recruit, right?
Yeah.
Top 10 recruit in the nation.
Prior to freshman year, he was preseason lotto,
right? And then
in NBA
completely underwhelmed. Averaged 4.5 points a game freshman year. Bumped that up to 9.5 points last year or something like that. And like that is a completely underwhelming stat line, you know, for a guy that was supposed to be a human highlight reel who was supposed to take over this team for us, and then it's completely underwhelmed. So there's got to be, you know, a lot of, you know, human element that needs to come into that, where he probably just needs a hard reset. If he felt like his time at Texas was probably just like an embarrassment or, a disappointment, which I feel like a lot of the Texas fans were frustrated with him because we wanted him to be so dope.
He
But
did get much. He
kind of
did
was
progress
solid,
though. That was the nice thing about him, was that he actually progressed year 1 to year 2. And it's hard. You're right, Nick. Like, they're young guys, and in the moment to understand, okay, this is best for me in the long term if I stay
Right.
2 more years. And by the time I leave Texas as a senior, I'll be the captain senior year. Maybe I'm playing with sophomore Tre Johnson. Like,
Right.
we're
But that's also not like in the back of your mind when you're coming out of high school and you're like a top 10 recruit. You're coming out of high school thinking, all right, I'm in Texas for 1 year and I'm going to be a lottery pick, and then I'm going to be kicking my feet up somewhere in the NBA and, guarding LeBron. Like that's the mindset you have as a 17-year-old coming out of high school.
and
So like, and he's been with RT, right? Like we're mentioning, this is RT's 3rd year. So it's like he was with RT for 2 years. And so he felt like, okay, I did develop, but I didn't develop the amount that I thought I was going to develop to get me to where I thought I was going to be coming out of high school. So
right.
Cincinnati's
he
a
didn't
head
go to
scratching move,
the
obviously.
RT. He went to Texas because of Beard.
Right. But exactly. That's also another point too.
But Terry was on the staff, though. It's not like he wasn't on the staff and a part of that recruiting process.
Right.
It's just, I mean, we're talking about the difference and distinction between the two transfer markets in basketball and football. It's also like the eligibility rules play such a huge factor in that too, right? Because it's like Arch Manning literally cannot go to the NFL draft right now. He can't. He's not able to. So why would he wait? Like, he knows exactly what his job is. It's to develop and get better. And right now, that's as a backup for the Longhorns, but he got to display his talents. And next year, it will be as our starting quarterback. And he's going to have everyone looking at him then in that scenario. And it's a great point about Mitchell. It's like, what kind of mental space would you expect to be in if you thought you were a lottery pick headed to the NBA after 1 year at Texas, and all of a sudden you're going into year 3 and you're at Cincinnati? It's why when we're talking NBA mock drafts, like, I like the Herbert Jones guys. I like those guys because they stayed and they didn't think they were going to the NBA after year 1. He's a 4-year college player who got better year to year, knew exactly what he needed to do. And for him, when he got into college,
who he was, knew his identity as a player.
He knew who he was, but he walked in as a freshman and they weren't like, yo, you're going to the NBA. He said that when he was a little kid. They said, you're lucky if you get minutes. When you get on the court, you defend. And then he turns that into year 4. He's hitting threes, and now he's playing for the New Orleans Pelicans, and he's starting for them. Like, it's a much more linear mental path for a guy that doesn't have the expectation of being that first-round talent. The one thing you didn't even mention about is he knows Tre Johnson's coming in. That might have been part of the reason why Dylan Mitchell was like, I don't want to – there's only 5 guys on the court. I thought this was going to be my team, and now it's not. And that's a pill you have to swallow, because there's always going to be a player that's better than you, that's younger. That always happens.
I do think, though, that like I completely am aligned with the Dylan Mitchell, what I would imagine his mindset to be like, you guys are putting out. You are the 5-star. He was the number 4 recruit on ESPN, and he didn't do what you said, kick his feet up, go to the NBA. Didn't happen. It didn't happen twice, by the way. Didn't happen after his freshman year, and then didn't happen again after his sophomore year. And I don't blame him for getting a fresh start. Makes complete sense. I will say, from a playmaking standpoint and from his ability standpoint, he did grow, and he was showing serious flashes of that human highlight reel ability, that high flying, put back dunk, cutting in, right, like off the baseline. And I do think, selfishly, I think, yes, it wouldn't have been his team. It's always going to be Tre Johnson's team based off what we saw last night. Again, we can't say it enough. That kid is absolutely ridiculous. But I think they really would have worked well together. And that's just such a shame that RT couldn't pitch that and keep him, because that 2-man game would have been electric. That issue of like, oh, Shedrick's not like a big enough body that you brought up, like he's dribbling around, doesn't have a real identity as a big man or as a force inside. Dylan Mitchell's 6'8", but who could jump higher than that guy? Not many people. He would have been an absolute force in that game. And I would just wished RT could have developed him as a shot blocker, developed him as like that Herb Jones defensive anchor, because he can't hit a 3, and that's not going to be his route to the NBA.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, game 1, we got a long way to go.
Jesus Christ.
The interesting thing is, I think we're more optimistic than a lot of other Texas Longhorn basketball fans are right now. And I hope that anyone who's listening, like, exercises patience, because it's a tough sport to win in. It really is.
My wife last night, Britt, was asking for you guys. She didn't know. My wife's name is Britt, Josh and Toss. She asked me last night. She's like, "Are most of the players from the team last year? Are they still on the team?" I'm like, "There's like 3 guys. Like it is a completely new team. Like they even flashed
Yeah.
a graphic in the middle of the game. Like how many transfers we have, how many freshmen we have. Like that's just gonna like you just need time. You know, like I remember
Yeah.
last year, like we had so many fresh or transfers and some freshmen too. And we were looking and saying, like, okay, like they still need more time. And like that was in like December or January. Like you need months to grow and mesh with the team and figure out who's doing what. So it's game
Yeah.
one. There's a lot of really easy tests, coming up for us to build and
Get
mesh the
rolling.
confidence a little bit. But it gets kind of real pretty soon because a month from now we have UConn, like we have Syracuse coming up in a couple of weeks, and then we're getting right thrown in it with the SEC. I mean, Big 12 was such a premier conference for us, but I think SEC might be the best conference this year.
We'll see. I think for Syracuse, you say, I think that's like the get right game. I'm not optimistic about UConn. Like, I think we could all be honest
No,
about
I
that.
know, but I'm just saying, like,
No, but Syracuse is the game. It's like, all right, can we get those easy wins, stack those up, get a team identity going, get Mark back into fold, and can we get that win that we should have had against Ohio State against Syracuse, and then kind of get back on the map and get rolling? I will point out, because we're talking about so much turnover based, your wife asking, hey, is everyone the same? You're like, no. Like, look at the quote unquote marquee game from last night. What was the big game from last night? Supposed to be a slobber knocker, number 6 versus number 8, Baylor versus Gonzaga. And yeah, we could be, we could have negative views and we could have like fears as Texas fans. If you are a Baylor fan and you have Scott Drew, you also have VJ Edgecombe, who's supposed to be like Tre Johnson, supposed to be that elite player, and you get smacked by almost 40 against Gonzaga.
it's not nice.
Like, it's not nice, bro. It's not. You let up a. When was the last time we've seen a Baylor team let up 101? I know it's Gonzaga, and I know what Mark Few does, and I know the most viral thing of last night was his son getting baptized after coming in the game by VJ Edgecombe, which was 2 of his field goals. He went 2 of 11, which would have been a lot worse. Imagine at least Tre Johnson went 10 of 20. Like, imagine if he went 2 of 11 and we lost. Like, that would have been another disaster. Like, Baylor also had a lot of turnover. They have a lot of new guys coming in, so
Yeah,
I
I
feel
mean,
like they can get right.
yeah, I mean, Baylor lost in a worse way than Maine did to Duke. Like, how's that possible?
Although that one Baylor player did put Mark Few's son on a poster, which was kind of
Edgecombe.
fun.
That was VJ
Yeah.
Edgecombe.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
funny.
he put him in a body bag, but like I think that's the last time we'll ever see Few Jr. in the game. If we want to be optimistic, I think that at least we weren't Baylor last night. Like that would have been a train wreck. But that would
Yeah,
have been a train wreck if we came
yeah,
out like that and we got absolutely pumped. And it's Ohio State. It's not Maine, right? It's not,
It was oh, yeah.
Dallas,
No, it was a single digit loss, 8-point loss, and there was times where we were coming back in and they pulled away again. So
Yeah.
it was a winnable game, but nonetheless, football. We had a bye week. We're the number 5 team. It looks like bye weeks, provide good news for us because last bye week we moved from 2 to 1. Now we're 6 to 5, which is nice. Obviously, that comes from Penn State losing to Ohio State, like you said, who we knew were frauds. Miami looked really good. Jumped us up to 4. They didn't look good actually up till the third quarter, and then our boy Malik Murphy couldn't stop throwing picks, and basically let Miami crawl back into the game. But I was looking at a scenario, regarding the SEC that I sent over to you guys, and there's a world where there could be an 8-way tie for first place in the SEC. So this is how it stands basically. If Texas loses to Florida, Georgia loses to Ole Miss, LSU loses to Bama, Tennessee loses to Georgia, and A&M loses to Texas, obviously in the last game of the season, the regular season would end with Bama, Georgia, LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, and Texas A&M in an 8-way tie for first place of the SEC, which would result in a Bama versus LSU SEC championship game. Obviously that's a lot of stuff for to unfold for that to happen, like that's pretty much hitting, an 8-leg parlay. But ultimately that just kind of shows right now how wide open this race is for the SEC and for getting your automatic bid to the college football playoff. It's not a walk-in for anyone right now because as we've seen, anyone can beat anyone. I mean, Florida was playing a pretty close game against Georgia last week, and then obviously Georgia pulled away, but regardless, like we've seen these games happen, and we played a close one against Vanderbilt. Like we can't take anything lightly from here on out. It just can't happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of in a position where you control your own destiny. Like
Oh yeah, 100%. If we went out, we're fine.
Like
That's
Arkansas,
four games.
I'm not none of these teams are walkovers. Let me just preface what I'm about to say with that. Arkansas looked absolutely trash against Ole Miss. Florida's best player not playing probably, right? A&M did not look good. They underwhelmed against South Carolina. They came out absolutely flat. Kentucky's had that game against Georgia and a game against Ole Miss and has since gone quiet. If you are the Texas Longhorns and you see all these other matchups in the SEC and you believe you are a championship team, that Georgia loss and that weird game against Vandy, I guess we can chalk it up as, have to be in the rear view mirror after this bye, and then you have to get on a roll. Quinn has to be healthy, ready to go. Makuba has to be in, ready to go. And then you just have to steamroll these teams and control your own destiny because it just doesn't go in the SEC like you're saying. There are a lot of teams in college football, if you go across the board, there's a lot of games and wild scenarios that can happen, and a lot of teams in front of us and around us that can fall off the wagon. Miami, we keep bringing up as a team that just keeps kind of almost skating by and has a not that great of a defense. The SMU Mustangs are back, and they might have to see them in the ACC championship, and they're a dangerous team. They handled Pitt like nobody's business. Like there are teams around us, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, like there are teams around us that can tear each other apart just outside the SEC. So if we take care of business and hopefully we see Georgia again, because I think that'd be the ideal matchup. Yes, maybe not from like a advantage or a favorite or a winning standpoint, but to prove our stamp and get another lick at them,
If you're not,
especially
if you're
getting
not,
another
if
lick.
you can't beat them, then you don't deserve to win the national championship. That's just plain and simple.
100%. 100%. And the way Carson Beck has been playing this season, like he has lost an insane amount of cash.
Yeah.
That has to be the team we want. Quite frankly, like I would rather see Georgia again because at least we have tape on them. At least we could look at our mistakes
Bam
and we know what they are. Than like another one of these teams. LSU, we'll see how they are this weekend against Bama. Bama, we'll see how they are against LSU. I mean, both those teams can like Bama at full go, full tilt. What they did against Georgia in the first half with a running quarterback, that's scary. If LSU was what they are in the first half against A&M, again, they had to put two complete games together. Those are scary opponents. Tennessee's defense is ferocious. It's on the same caliber, in my opinion, as Georgia's, or at least close to it. Like there is a lot of competition in the SEC, and all we can do is hope we take care of business and hope Georgia takes care of business and we get to see them again, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with you on that. I'd much rather see Georgia again than try to see Bama or LSU just based off of trying to get the monkey off our back and trying to basically prove the haters wrong. Because, like, like I just said, like, if you want to win the national championship, like, there needs to be no doubt left in the people's minds, in the committee, the fans, the other coaches, the players. Like, you need to, reconcile that win or that loss that you had at home. And so the only way to do that is to face them in that championship game and beat them and then earn your right to go. So, I mean, if you can't beat them, then you're not winning the Natty. That's just plain and simple, because then they're the ones that deserve to win the Natty.
Wait, but what if they're not in the SEC championship, but we are? That changes things, though.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're just saying ideally we'd want to face them.
I like it. I like the revenge factor, but it's like, to me, it's ultimately like we win the SEC championship. I don't really care who we play.
Yeah,
like,
no, I know, but I mean, I think that
I
even if they don't make that SEC championship game, they're probably still getting a bid to the playoff.
For sure.
An at-large bid. And so eventually, I feel like we would have to see them at some point.
We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying. And in that scenario, we may have to play them. We may not, right? That's the interesting thing about the new playoff is that you just because multiple SEC teams are getting to the college football playoff doesn't mean that you'd end up playing them if they lose to another team or if you lose. Yeah, I mean, likely we take care of business and hopefully we can get to the SEC championship. We take care of business and we don't get to the SEC championship because of that crazy scenario that you laid out, we're still an at-large bid, in my opinion. We lose one more game, that's where it starts to get really, really dicey. Because at that point, we're likely not making the SEC championship, like high percentage not making the SEC championship, and then we don't have an extra game to prove to the committee that we belong.
And it's a bad loss, unless it's A&M, I'll say.
Let's say A&M. Yeah, because Florida no longer has Lagway, so they're playing a third string QB.
I mean,
who
even if
was,
we
was
lose
it,
to A&M, like that's a bad loss for us personally too.
Of course,
Yeah,
of course.
That's
we can't lose.
But is the expectation that Green is going to play against us as of now? I know this is 2 weeks out, but he got hurt too. You didn't mention that, but he got hurt in that game. That's part of the reason why they looked so bad, since their starting quarterback went out. And obviously we're talking about Arkansas.
Oh, Arkansas.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, A&M's on Marcel Reed too. Like they're all on different quarterbacks right now.
Yeah, if you list the quarterbacks that we've had to face, and now acknowledging how bad Carson Beck has been this season, like we haven't had many challenges from opposing quarterbacks. Truly,
probably our biggest challenge last week.
Yeah,
where is that big of a challenge this year, though? Who is that big of a challenge? Cam Ward?
Yeah, it's a big challenge.
That's it, though.
Big challenge, I feel like
Jalen Milroe. I think Milroe.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know, man. There's been like other quarterbacks that are on lesser teams that are more of a challenge.
I think they're not. I think
what's that kid's name on Washington State? That guy's a baller.
Like I think in years past there was more of challenges. To be honest, for me, this is not the cream of the crop quarterback class. We all know that.
No, I think that's part of the reason why there's been so much chaos. I mean, Carson Beck, like, at least if we know we're playing him, he's going to throw 2 picks. So we have an opportunity that we wouldn't necessarily have if we're playing a guy like Diego Pavia.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to preview it in a couple of days with our boy Q. So get your horns up.
Hook 'em.
Horns up, guys. We'll see you guys next time. We out here. We love you.